All right, you guys. So thanks for joining. So tonight we're going to talk about build a shared understanding about a project. So we're going to start with talking about the enablers. So one of the first goals in onboarding a team for a project is to ensure that they reach a consensus and that we support the outcome of the parties' agreement. So doing that, we have the enablers, which are survey all the parties to reach a consensus and then support the outcome of the parties' agreement. Okay? Pretty simple, just to kick it off. So we have a couple of deliverables. The deliverables are going to be the vision. We'll talk about the XP metaphor, the product box exercise. And then we have a couple of tools. We've got the charter, obviously the project charter, the project plan, the kickoff meeting, brainstorming, and the T-shaped skills. So, all right, so a vision is a desired end state. It's often described as a set of desired outcomes, objectives and outcomes. So when we have a new project that's commenced, it's critical to have a clear vision of the desired objectives, okay? Depending on a well-defined, depending on how well-defined the deliverables of the project are, a more traditional waterfall approach or a more agile approach can be adopted during this. So the more agile approach, the more likely it is that a specific component of the solutions are not clearly understood and subject to change. The project vision should be sufficiently immutable and to serve as a kind of like a North Star for the project. So the various components can change and adapt, but the vision should remain consistent and reasonable. So many of the projects that begin with the creation of a vision statement. So this can describe the product or the solution, the intended users or the consumers of the solution, and the desired objectives, then the differentiators from the competitive output and approaches with the key features. So in the vision, we've had the start of the end of the project. The vision statement could include the product solution, the intended users, key desired objectives, and the key benefits, okay? Pretty simple, but what we're gonna touch on here is a little more in depth. So the charter, obviously you guys are all familiar with what the project charter is a document that's issued by the project initiator or the sponsor that formally authorizes the existence of the project. And that's the one thing I'm pretty sure that actually comes up in the test if they're still doing definitions in there, you want to know that. And it gives the authority to apply the organizational resources to the project activities. So the project initiator or the sponsor is the person who provides resources and support for the project and is accountable for enabling the project's success. If you don't have the charter in place and you don't have the official authority, a lot of times you don't have the people getting behind the project. So an effective project charter conveys why the project's being initiated and what the project's outcome will be. And ensures that you have the support for the project, like I just said, and gives you the authority to apply the resources. So you want to be able to pull the resources from the places that you need. And again, this is just basically what I just talked about. So we're talking about what the requirements are for the project, what the description of the project is. You might get into what some of the risk is. Is there money out there? Do you have a key stakeholder list yet? Then the stakeholders can change as this goes along. You have the right approval, so you can pull the people over that you need, and that you have the authority to sponsor the project. You guys see this okay? I know I don't have it in presentation mode, but sometimes it's easier to see the full screen like this.
We can see it.
Yep.
Okay, good,
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, awesome. All right. So let's keep going forward on this. So the project charter also establishes the relationship between the requesting organization and the performing organization. So the initial agreement will typically provide a formal contract to start the project. The charter validates the alignment of the project to the organizational strategy, but it's not considered part of the actual contract. For internal projects, you should still be able to ensure that for proper delivery, you still want to have a project charter, even if it's internal. So ideally, what you have is the project manager select while the charter is being developed, and that's the best scenario. And it can be developed by a sponsor or a project manager, but always prior to the project planning. So early engagement between the sponsor and the project manager ensures an understanding of the project and that the objectives and the desired stakeholder benefits, so everybody knows what's going on. And by providing a charter, then the organization explicitly permits the creation of the project and allows for the resources that will enable you to plan and execute and control the project. All right, so Agile Ceremonies. excuse me. Actually, I'm going to back up here just one second. So, talked about the charter. We know what's in the charter, and my screen's messing with me, and I apologize. Okay, so in some industries and organizations, a project overview statement can be used. I skipped over that slide. I apologize. A project overview statement can be used to communicate enterprise-wide intent and the vision of the project. A statement may serve as a draft for the project charter or a summary for the charter that's being distributed. The statement should be less than a page and typically captures the project's objective, the problem, the opportunity, and the criteria for success. So we want to win with authorization via the project charter and approved project overview statement. The assigned project manager can begin the activities for project planning. This will be described in more detail later on as we go through, but can range from a detailed project plan broken out into a work breakdown structure with specific activities, dependencies, milestones, dates assigned in advance. I'm sorry? Okay. Let's see, dates assigned in a simple in advance with simple prioritized backlog for initial user stories on the customer's initial understanding of what needs to be accomplished during that. All right, let me pop into the next slide. I did hear somebody pop in. Does anybody have a question while I'm going along?
Yeah, Tracy, I have a quick question. You might have said this, but I can't remember. Is the project overview statement, is that in the project charter, or can it be, or is it a separate? It's occurring separate. Kind of simultaneously, just separate.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is. And that's new to, well, the statement actually, the charter could be bigger than a page. Obviously, it can go on for a little bit. So the statement is kind of an overview of what the charter is.
So I thought I read, and maybe I just misread this, that the project statement, so the project charter is more high level, is that correct? And the project overview kind of goes into the details a little bit more? Well,
the project charter, yeah, I think it's kind of the opposite. Well, the charter is high level. It is high level. That's the original. Right. This is my idea. This is what I'm thinking. You know, this is what I need for resources. I need somebody to approve it. And then as you continue to go on, that's why when it even mentioned the project breakdown structure, you start to get into the project and you start to break it down piece by piece by piece as you start to go through. All of this, this time at least in reviewing this, it makes a little more sense. It's not exactly in the order that you may be reading in the PMBOK, but it does make more sense than the way it has been in the past where you were just reading chapter after chapter, but the pieces didn't actually go together when you were reading it. So if you guys go back when you're finished with the classes and pull the slides and review some of this stuff, it'll make more sense than, like I said, just reading it. And I think the Rita and the Andy books also help to put it in alignment when you're going through, that they do it a little more in the order of the project than the PMBOK does. And you guys may be noticing that as you're reading them and going through them. I hope I answered your question and all that.
So the overview is less high level, or the overview is more high level than the project charter?
The overview describes in more detail.
Okay.
The work breakdown structure, like I said, the charter is really the overview umbrella, and then it starts to break down. The project statement is kind of a condensed version of what the charter is.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Now we get into the Agile ceremonies. So the ceremonies, the practices, the Scrum uses ceremonies to establish the cadence of the meetings to assist the team in preparing and progressing in the project. And then the Scrum Master is the coach of the development team and the process owner for the Scrum frameworks. So there are 4 commonly described ceremonies that they use in this, and these are in the table. And I'm just going to go through them a little bit because they're different than when I was doing them. So I'm just going to explain them to you, make sure you guys have a handle on this. So a sprint planning, which is the first one on there, is a collaborative event in Scrum in which the Scrum team plans the work for the current sprint, which is the next one down. In other words, so the meetings that facilitate the communication, the collaboration between the customer and referred to as the Scrum or as a product owner and the project team. So sprint planning meeting facilitates agreements on small goals for the team to complete during a short defined period of time, generally references as a sprint or an iteration in this case. So a sprint is a time box between 1 to 4 weeks to facilitate planning and improve the quality of estimation, set consistent cadence for the team and the product owner. So the daily stand-up meetings, and I know the last instructor that we had on talked about is daily stand-up meetings. These are not long meetings. These are just quick, just what they say, stand-up meetings to kind of go around. Where are you? What's next? What's the objective? And move along. It's not an actual status meeting where you're sitting down and talking about the whole thing. It's just a quick, are you on target? Let's keep moving along. And then we have a sprint review. And that's a review at the end of every iteration with the product owner and the other customer stakeholders to review the progress of the product, to get early feedback. That's where the iterations come from, and where the product owner reviews and accepts the stories that are delivered within an iteration. And then we have the sprint retrospective, which is the meeting of the team members that are facilitated by the Scrum Master for the team to identify its own improvements, where the sprint review, this is kind of tongue-tied, where a sprint review reviews the products and identifies the improvement, and the retrospective reviews the team's process and the processes, and it's used to identify the ways the team can improve the performance and collaboration. That's a mouthful. Pop over here. So a sprint retrospective, I apologize. Hang on a second. Okay. All right. All right. So then we have other meetings that are sometimes held. These are the kickoff meetings, and a kickoff meeting sounds a little bit different than what it actually is. So a project team may have one or a number of kickoff meetings. These meetings seek to establish the context, assist the team in formation, ensure proper alignment to the overall project vision. And some of the activities that we have listed that it can include is defining the vision statement, defining a team charter, assisting the customer with a customer or product owner with story writing, estimation efforts, prioritization planning, and the production of initial product backlog. So in doing that, we're establishing other initial startup activities that can be required, which is the sprint zero. These can include onboarding the team, credentialing, establishing environments and supporting communication tools, and just a bunch of other activities that can ensure the teams are in place and ready to work on the initial objectives. I said a lot of mouthfuls. If you have a question, just stop me for a second. All right, so T-shaped skills. So T-shaped skills, often Agile teams invest in becoming more cross-functional with T-shaped, and that refers to a person with one deep area of specialization and a broad ability in the rest of their skills that are required by the team. And I know you guys have probably heard that the best project team is made up of by people who don't have the same skills, because if everybody has the same skill, nobody's going to think outside the box and do the different things. So a lot of times when you have project teams, the teams are made up of people with different skills in different places, and that's what makes a super efficient team. All right. All right, so then we have iteration planning. I'm sorry, I don't like when I'm doing it this way with the tiles or the slides don't come up exactly the same. Okay, so iteration or sprint planning is one of the core Agile ceremonies that's used in Scrum XP and many other Agile approaches. So Agile breaks the project timeline into small 4 iterations, 1 to 4 week iterations, like I said before. The team will work together with the customer representative, sometimes called the product owner in Scrum, to do the following, and that's review the highest prioritized user stories, which are the key outcomes to the customer solution. They ask questions. They come to an agreement on which stories the team will focus on in the complete iteration. And once the team and the product owner have agreed on the stories for that iteration, the team then performs its own task decomposition, kind of like a work breakdown structure, to determine what activities will need to be performed by the team in order to deliver on the iteration objectives. These are often organized and tracked on a task board, which is what we're going to look at next. Just kind of envision a whiteboard with Post-it notes up there, and that's kind of what the task board looks like. So the task boards are used to visualize the work and enable the team and other stakeholders to track the progress as the work is performed during the iteration. And the goal of it is to use the board to promote the visibility and limit the amount of work in progress, which they also call WIP for one of their other acronyms. Examples of the task boards include the Kanban board, the to-do list, procedure checklist, and Scrum boards. And if you guys haven't noticed, a lot of the verbiage that they use, a lot of the little names, they all seem to have Asian descent background. So a Kanban board is a visualization tool that enables improvements to the workflow by making bottlenecks and work quantities visible. Those little terms come up a bunch, and I don't know on the test now whether they're, I don't think there's much definition as they are actual situational questions. I'm going to stop for a minute. Anybody have any questions? Because I'm throwing a bunch of stuff out at you guys, so I just want to check to make sure. No? Okay. All right. So consensus. This seems kind of silly, but we'll just go over it. Consensus is a project team. Project teams frequently have to work together to make decisions about different aspects of the project, including estimates of effort, tasks to produce certain deliverables, approaches for the problem, and other issues. So in order to assist them in trying to achieve a consensus when possible and coordinate conflict identification and resolution where needed, there's a number of different techniques that project managers or agile coaches can use. And some of those are the fist of five techniques, the Roman voting, the polling, and dot viewing. So the fist of five techniques is pretty much what it looks like in the diagram there. If you're agreeing and you're talking about it, it's very simple. They hold up a fist to give them that, you disagree. And as you go along, one finger, two fingers, three fingers, that's five fingers that they totally agree. So that's just kind of a visual way of doing it as they're going through. They also have the Roman voting, which is super simple to think about, as either a thumbs up or thumb down. I'm not sure where the Roman part comes in. Obviously, thumbs down is the disagreement. And if anyone thumbs down on the approach, then the facilitator tries to work to identify and enable the team to address the objections. Polling is pretty much Roman
where
Coliseum,
the fighters used to, you die if it's thumbs down.
Okay, all right, okay. Thank you. I didn't know that was that simple. That's where that came from. All right, so then we have the polling. That's pretty much, again, what it says. So it's another technique. So if it's a unanimous decision and a decision has been reached, there's no objections after the polling, then they consider the problem solved and they move on. The dot voting, I look at dot voting and I think of, I was watching a TV show, kind of just sparked my mind as they put a little dot on things when they wanted to sell it. It was an art gallery thing I was watching. It was a sitcom, not just about art galleries. But anyhow, so when you're doing the dot voting, different stakeholders are given a certain amount of dots, and depending on what it is, they could be given up to maybe 10 dots at a time. So if somebody wants to take their topic and make sure that it's addressed, they're putting a sticky note on it. So if you're giving somebody 10 dots, they can vote up to a combination of up to 10 times, so they could put all of their dots on one topic if they think that topic is that important. So based on the number of dots that each item receives, that's the priority that's identified in which one's going to go, which one's the most important to discuss. Any questions there? That's all pretty kind of self-explanatory. They do have, let's see, we have another estimation technique, that's the Tshirt Sizing, which I thought was kind of interesting. So this is agile teams don't use absolute estimates to predict the level of work involved in a task. If there's too much work, it's innovative and dependent on the number of factors, including the risk and complexity of the labor. So Instead, Agile teams use relative estimation approaches to take all the factors into account and using relative sizing methods to help with the overall effort. So a couple of the methods that they use are the Tshirt Sizing, obviously, basically small to XXL, just like it says, to determine which one is the most important. And this other one, if I get it right, is the modified Fibonacci sequence. They have that on there, which is 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. Basically, the same number of factors. It's often referred to as story points. They're unitless and attempt to capture the overall impact of the work as they're going through it. So that's what that is. All right, we have a couple. Excuse me just one second. All right, so we also have story pointing, and we have the story pointing uses a relative measure of level for difficulty, just what it says, and that was the Fibonacci sequence. And then we have the planning poker, and that's a technique that's used to perform the estimates, and it's called the planning poker. In the planning poker, a user story is presented to the team. There's a conversation among the team members with the customer, the product owner, and Scrum. And when the team has its questions, the facilitator or the Scrum Master asks the team to use a card deck, which is generally in the modified, generally with modified numbers, to vote for the number of points to assign to the story. So if there's disagreements, the facilitator will coordinate a discussion to try to help the team either come to a consensus on the point totals, and then it's repeated on several of the stories at the top of the backlog to ensure that they're ready for inclusion into the iteration or the sprint. That's kind of a mouthful. All righty. All right, before I get to XP metaphor, does anybody have a question? Nope, okay. All right, so the XP metaphor, it's a common extreme programming, basically just what it says, that describes the techniques. It's a common vision of how the program works, which is called the metaphor. So metaphors should be simple, non-technical, enabling a broad array of stakeholders to understand the overarching approach that's being taken to provide the capability or to solve the problem. All right. Then we have the product box exercise, which we're going through this kind of quickly here. Okay, the product box exercise is basically, it's another technique used to explain the overarching solution, which is, it's called the product box exercise. In this exercise, the stakeholders try to describe the aspects of a solution the same way a marketer might describe product features and benefits on a box. So basically think of your story on the back of a cereal box or a modem box. You're trying to fit it all into kind of like an elevator pitch type thing. So this exercise can help the teams better understand the different types of users of a solution and their priorities, their likes, their dislikes, and the key aspect of the solution that drive the most critical value aspects of the solution. All right. So brainstorming, I know brainstorming comes up in the PMBOK quite a bit. Brainstorming is a simple technique that's used to generate a list of ideas. It should be led by a facilitator, and the group tends to be a group of stakeholders. It could be team members. It could be subject matter experts. And after quickly generating a list of alternatives, the group performs an analysis of the alternatives and generally chooses a particular one for the action. This list can be prioritized to combine brainstorming with the dot voting, so you quickly have the team assess all the alternatives and then quickly move to decide which ones to focus upon. We are going real quickly here, and no questions still? Okay. All right. All right, let's keep going here. So guidelines to reach a consensus and support the outcome of the parties' agreement. These are techniques that are covered in this topic, are useful in helping the teams assess alternatives and make decisions with some specific guidelines. We got some specific guidelines for you guys to use. So having the team charter is enormously helpful, as it may specify how the team chooses to handle certain scenarios and disagreements that arise. For example, team members may disagree about the number of story points to estimate for the particular story. The team charter may designate that the team will use a higher estimate or that majority vote rule.
Are you speaking to something that's, because I'm seeing the brainstorming slide. Is this a next slide, the 19 that you're speaking to? Or
No,
you
are correct.
Notes?
You are correct. I do have notes, but I did jump ahead. I was on brainstorming and I jumped ahead.
Oh, okay. I was like, I'm not seeing any of that on the screen.
Yeah, no, I was on brainstorming and I jumped ahead.
Okay.
All right. Actually, I already covered brainstorming, so I already read through that.
Yeah, but then what slide 19? Is that the one that you were speaking to?
Slide 19 was the one that I was just speaking to, the guidelines for consensus.
Ah, yes, that's the one. Perfect.
Okay.
I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. Okay, so let's see. So in general, it's preferable to seek out a consensus among the teams when possible and try to recognize that it will not always be possible, kind of like ordering a pizza. So for those times when a consensus isn't possible, it's helpful to have agreed upon approach in advance, which is where you use the charter and some of your other things in advance to make sure that you have an understanding of what it is that's going to work for you. So this is a really, really short topic, and it just doesn't seem to be quite right here. So I'm going to go over a couple scenarios with you guys while I have them. Because do you have any, you got to have some questions on the topics that I went through, because we went through way too fast to cover all that and not have any questions. I know you can go back and read it pretty simply, but I just want to make sure that you guys are understanding it.
I have a separate question too. Sorry. Next week, it just says let's review, and there's no PowerPoint. Is that us just listening to the recording that's already attached?
I don't think he's actually posted it yet. Give me 1 second. Let me just look over there. I was looking earlier. I just don't think it's posted yet.
Okay, so there was a recording. It's probably from the last time they had the class, but there's no, that's the only week that doesn't have the PowerPoint attached.
No, actually, I think next week might be the test.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm talking about Wednesday's meeting. Wednesday, not next week. I'm sorry. So it's.
So let's review.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's just covering the topics that would have already been covered in the first 3 classes, 4 classes up including today. I think they're going to do a review before the test that's coming up. I think that's all that is.
Thank you.
Yeah, I looked at that myself and I saw that it wasn't there. So, but I believe that's what it is, that they're just going to cover it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Pop back over there.
Tracy, I have a question about this slide, and I just don't know if we the guideline to reach consensus, the one that's currently being showed.
Yes.
So, and I confess I don't remember where I read this at this point, but is this where you get into things like majority rules if there's no consensus, or a plurality, a consensus of
actually
that kind of stuff?
Yeah, you read a little bit ahead, because that's coming up actually in the next set of slides. Not tonight, but in the next set of slides that you do, you're going to see that. Yeah, it's going to be unanimity, plurality, anonymity. I think there's like 5 of them, and that's coming up in the next one. So yes, you did read it, and it is coming up. And brainstorming. Sorry for reading it. No problem. Brainstorming, I don't know whether that's one of them. I think that's this group. The next group is actually, and I don't remember exact heading that that's under, but I know it's 5 of them. I think it's unanimity, plurality, and anonymity. I know there's 5 of them. So you did see it. It is coming in the next sector.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah, no problem. Okay, so before I move in, you guys, as you're reading these, are you reading like a chapter ahead? Or you're staying about a chapter or 2 ahead when you're reading, or you're reading the PMBOK as you're going along week by week?
I'm staying ahead because I know I'm going to have to read it again.
Do you have a supplemental that you're reading with it? Do you have like Andy or Rita that you're reading?
Yeah, I'm reading the Andy Crow, and then I'm using the PMBOK as like if I need to know a little bit more.
Okay.
But again, at the Andy Crow, I know I'm going to have to read that like probably 2 or 3 times in order to grasp it. For right now, I'm just doing a quick.
Well, like I said, what they're teaching here and what Rita and Andy did, because when I first took it, it was read the PMBOK, and I read that thing, and I memorized all of the charts that we had to memorize, memorized all the formula, and I thought, this just doesn't go together very smoothly. I just had the hardest time figuring out why it didn't make sense. And then as you read Rita and Andy, you can see how it doesn't come from exactly the chapter that you're in. Some of the stuff pulls ahead, just like they're presenting now. It's kind of, you're going to see things on the slides that are not necessarily in the chapter that you're in, but it's kind of going straight through, if that makes sense. And I wish somebody would have explained that back when I was doing it, because I had the hardest time getting that.
Yeah, actually, I was just asking a question on another chat about that. So these slides, like I'm reading the ReadABook, and they're not really corresponding. Is it just kind of read through the ReadABook? I mean, I've kind of already gone through it once, but go through it, and then I'm still struggling a little bit how to incorporate these slides with the ReadABook. So any recommendation?
So I will tell you, I had the same struggle when we started this a few weeks ago, these classes. And so I read the PMBOK earlier this year. So, and that I didn't feel like helped me very much, but somebody told me to read it just from the beginning to the end. And it was sort of like reading the Bible, and it didn't really go very well together to read it in that order. But regardless of that, and then I caught on a few classes ago, if you read before each class, at least before each class, the exam prep book, that PMI authorized PMP exam prep book, that really prepares you for the classes that we have in the evenings. That's where these seem to be pulled from. And then I did the ReadABook too, and so I'm doing the ReadABook kind of like on my lunch every day. Like every day I'm doing the ReadABook and I'm working through now, and I'm using the PMBOK now as a reference, and that, at least for me, that seems to work really well. I think we just each have to kind of figure out our path with it for our own selves.
You do, and you know, everybody will tell you there's a certain way to study, and everybody's different, so you have to learn differently. But I will tell you, do you guys have the brain dump? Did they give you the brain dump this time? That page that you have to memorize, it's like 65 or 67 in the PMBOK, I think.
Yeah, our
page
our
25
mentor up to us last week.
Okay. That actually, when I first started doing it, I was trying to memorize it like straight across, and it didn't make sense. And it actually is more like reading a newspaper column up and down, which makes more sense, which is kind of how this information is going. So, and reading the PMBOK is totally dry. It doesn't make any sense as you're reading all the inputs, outputs, tools. I mean, it does make sense, but as you're looking at it, you're thinking, there's no way I'm going to get this. And then as you read Rita, you're like, oh, I get it. It kind of ties in. Or you read Andy, it ties in a little bit, and it makes a little more sense. So from reading it from a story type perspective, or more of a manual, I guess, reading Rita and Andy makes a little more sense, and working with it that way and referring back to the PMBOK, because it used to be that when you took the test, it was all memorization, and you just memorized the topics, you memorized the tools and techniques and the definitions, and that was the test. And from what I'm understanding from the new test is it's more scenario-based with not as much focus on the definitions and the the equations and that type of thing. But you still need to know how to do them. It's not to say that there won't be a question on there, so you should still pay attention to them. But I know that it's more about the storytelling and reading through it, and more like a word problem versus actually looking at the problems and the definitions and figuring them out. So study at your own pace. Just know that the classes are here to help you. And I had a book of the slides. I actually printed them out, went over them, highlighted them, which you can do online. And just kind of, you have to make your own study guide and make whatever makes the most sense to you as you go through it and learn it. And, you know, reading the PMBOK ahead is great because obviously somebody's already done that. I could tell by that, listening to the question. Reading it so you have an understanding of the terms that are coming up. And then these slides are new from when I did it. So they are a little more with the book that's coming from PMI. Somebody just mentioned what the name of it was, and I apologize, I forget the name of it, but that's kind of the way it's going. So hopefully that makes sense to some of you guys. It's not, don't frustrate yourself with trying to do everything all at once. Just learn the best that you can learn and stay on a path. Once you get off that path of studying and going through, it's very hard to get back on track. So stick with it. Okay, so let's talk a little bit. So I have a couple scenarios here. So I'm going to give you the scenario. You guys can kind of think about it a little bit. It's not necessarily that we have to have a whole lecture for the answer, but so to ensure that you have necessary buy-in and commitment and resources required to make the project a success, you'll offer to assist in creating a formal project charter. So the question is, what should be included and who should sign it? Anybody want to take a stab at it?
Are these questions on the last slide so that we can, like I heard what you said, I just so I can read it again slowly. Thank you.
Yeah. There you go. Actually, there's a little more to it. This one is saying, why do you think it's important to identify the document and project stakeholders? Yeah, the other one's just the question that I read out is a little more in depth. So
can you read it one more time?
Sure. So to ensure that you have necessary buy-in, no worries, necessary buy-in, commitment, and resources required to make a project a success, you offer to assist the team in creating a formal project charter. What should be included and who should sign it? And I will tell you that as you go through these questions, almost every question has a trick or a twist, and not necessarily a right or wrong answer, but the closest to the correct answer. Anybody see the twist in the first part of it? The question reads, to ensure you have the necessary buy-in, commitment, and resources required to make the project a success, you offer to assist them in creating a formal project charter. And if you didn't catch it, the first thing there that's wrong is the project charter should already be in place. So that's the twist. Okay, so too often
I'm sorry, I'm having the same problem. I went to reread the question over, and my brain is not conditioned enough yet.
No, they only have the two little questions here. So this one is a scenario question that's not in the slide.
Okay.
That's why you're having a hard time with it. So actually, I'm going to do this so we don't confuse you. We'll just stick there. So the question was, that way you're not looking at a question on the screen. The question was to ensure that you have necessary buy-in, commitment, and resources to make the project a success, you offer the team assistance in creating the charter. So the first problem with that was the charter should already be in place. Once there's a team, the charter's in place before anything else happens. So there wouldn't necessarily be a team before there's a charter. There's not a project manager until there's a charter normally, and there's not normally a team and resources until there's a charter. So that was the first thing. And if you don't have that, then there's a lot of confusion and misunderstanding. So your charter at a minimum should include the project's purpose, the project objectives, what the success criteria would be, basically the high-level requirements, obviously the project description, and then you have some milestones and some other things in there. So anything that the list doesn't exist in the list isn't usually part of the charter. So charters don't normally change. I should say don't normally change. They don't change. Once you create a charter, once it's there, once it's established, that's it. Other things can change as things go along. The charter doesn't change. Have you guys, I'm sure you've picked up on that as you're reading through. But there's different things that do go as you're going through the project. Different things change based on analysis and variances and that type of thing, but the charter will never change. It's always the first thing that you do. It's always a solid object. Once it's done, basically, that's it. You don't change the charter. And that, if they're still doing true and false on the test, that does come up. Charters don't change.
Tracy, so the way the Crow book described it is the project's birth certificate. Would you agree with that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
That's
a
good amount. Yep. It's not supposed to change. Once that's, and I'm trying to think of the other terminology to give you guys the right analogy, but when you have resources, you can have variances in your resources as you start to look at them and determine what's needed. And as different pieces of the project close and change, the resources may change, and you may have variances in your monies and your monetary values that can change. All those pieces can change, but they never change to the charter. The charter is always there. Everything else could change as it goes along, but that's the birth certificate. That's a great analogy. I hadn't heard that yet. Good way to remember it. Okay, let me see. All right, so the next question says, you've decided to do a rapidly changing nature of the project. I'm sorry. You've decided to do the rapidly changing nature of the product. Scratch that. Start over. You have decided, due to the rapidly changing nature of the project's requirements, that you wish to run on this project using the Agile approaches, the Scrum. Your team is unfamiliar with the Agile ceremonies, and you want to explain what they are and how they'll work. What are the Agile ceremonies that need to be included? We actually just went over this in the slides. So as you're doing this, what would be any one of the Agile ceremonies? I'll ask you. There's 5 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, there's 4 of them.
Sprint planning.
Right.
Daily stand-up.
Right.
Sprint review.
Right.
Would that be considered the retrospective?
No, the retrospective is different than the review.
Okay.
Okay, good. Okay. All right, so this is another one from the slides. Doesn't mean go back and look at the slides. Let's see if you can remember it. Okay, as your team is unfamiliar with Agile, they're also unfamiliar with some of the Agile practices for achieving the agreement, the estimation effort, and creating a shared vision of the solution they're trying to produce. I'll read it again. As your team is unfamiliar with Agile, they're also unfamiliar with some of the Agile practices for achieving agreement, estimation of effort, and creating a shared vision of the solution that they're trying to produce. What are some of the methods for achieving the agreement?
This is 5.
Right?
Thumbs down.
Right, the Roman voting, right? Thumbs up, thumbs down, right?
polling and with the 5.
Right. And then we have the consensus. And again, I don't know how many, as you guys, I'm not sure which, I know we used to use Exam Wizard, and I know there's another program out there that you can buy for some of the test taking. As you guys are doing your test taking and you're taking your questions, practice tests, and you get into those, just a suggestion, because again, everybody learns differently. I would try to do questions after each one of these classes or your chapter that you're in to make sure that you're understanding the questions and the methods and the things that they're asking for, because if you get, I didn't learn about some of the practice tools until I was into like chapter 9 or 10 of the PMBOK, which was classes that were several weeks down the road. By the time I got to them, you were starting to forget some of the things they wanted you to remember. So if you haven't started working the resources or using some of the products that are available, either through purchase or through PMI, to learn some of this, like we talked about the plurality, that's going to come up next, and the brainstorming, and in this case, FIST of 5, all these little things that you see that seem kind of, I don't want to say silly, but things like you think, oh, I'll remember those. Some of the questions are so tricky when you're taking the test. Like I said, that if it's a very black and white, this says what could be included, doesn't mean they're all included. So you have to look for those words that are always, sometimes, often. So make sure when you're answering your questions that you look for those words. And as you're taking the practice tests, look for those things too. But try to take them as you go along so these things will stick out in your mind. And as you start to read forward, things that you've tested on will pop out and make more sense. Hopefully that helps, because I was not aware of what to do with all my tools when we got them. They threw everything at us. I shouldn't say they threw everything at us. There was so much stuff that we received, and different people were trying to help with different things, that you get so much information that sometimes you don't know what to do with it. And I know in the ReadABook, I think just after chapter 4, or the introduction to the PMBOK, which matches up to chapter 4, there's those little pieces of paper that you get to cut out and start to kind of put them in order. Again, that was something I wasn't aware of. If you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, and I don't know whether Andy has it in his book, I would look at those and start trying to do it earlier rather than later and try to memorize it. It is actually very helpful. You guys anybody gotten to that?
Yeah, are you talking about the processes and domains under each of the of the 5? Okay, yeah. So also in the ReadABook, because she has an updated one for a 10th edition that she published for this year's exam. And
okay, okay.
She also has a really helpful website. I'll put it in the chat here in a minute. And I don't even think you have to buy the ReadABook to use because I didn't have to put anything in to validate that I bought the book. But you may be able to use that. It's like an online where you go in and you put them all in. It's like a game, basically. It's for games.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. Yeah. Okay. That's cool.
Yeah. And then after you're done, because the planning steps all have to be in exactly the perfect order, you can go in and play with that. So I did that for the first time today. I did not do very well, but I will get back.
you will. That's why I said start it early and do it, when you can. If you wait too long, it becomes challenging, and then it's total memorization. But if you can start working on it, it helps you answer questions to understand what process you're in and where you're supposed to be going next, or what's missing and what needs to be filled in. It's actually very helpful. The first time I looked at it, I thought, this is a really silly game. I don't have time for that. I have to learn what I'm doing here. But as you start to understand what they're doing, and when I read the PMBOK, then I read Rita, and then I tried to do the flashcards and do everything in that kind of order, and it didn't work. So it's just a tip. I'm not telling you guys that's how you should do it, but in any of the supplemental stuff you have, take it in little bits and bites and try to keep current with it. It'll make more sense to you. All right, I'm going to pop back here to what are some techniques for estimation? That's the question. What are some of the techniques for estimation? And we covered that in the class tonight.
I like Tshirt sizing.
That's one of them.
Fibonacci sequence.
That's one of them, yep. And one of the other ones, think of being you're in Vegas.
Poker?
The poker.
Planning poker, right. And there's some other techniques too. That was good. Good, guys. Okay. All right. And then what are some techniques for establishing a shared vision? And this was kind of so the key that should give this part of this away is a shared vision. So visualize the little dots, like I was talking about the art gallery when people are putting the dots on. So it was dot voting.
Brainstorming.
Think of your cereal box, your product box. And then the XP metaphor. Okay. All right. So this one went very quickly. And hopefully I've got everything covered that they need, but the test is on topics, and I still have a summary and stuff to go through, but the topics for your test are 1 through 4 for next week, right?
Actually, we don't know much information about the test. We don't know where we will be taking it.
Well, it's very similar to, you guys get the I'm going to stop the sharing so I don't think you lost it for a second. Do you get the homework questions in the classes?
No.
There's no questions attached for?
They have not provided
do
homework
see
questions. They keep telling us that the guidance is for us to continue to read with no true guidance as to how we're supposed to accomplish it. I realize this is a college level course, so I'm just attempting to keep up.
Okay.
So I did see in the shared document, students only, there's a Word document that says PMN education link to homework and test version 5. Yeah. When I downloaded that and tried to click on the very first chapter and I put my ATT ID and I tried both global and my normal password, it doesn't take me anywhere. So then I thought maybe because it's from May 12th, 2016, maybe it's not active. Oh,
yeah, no, it would not be 2016. No, that would be the older version of the test. That would not be any good.
How do we get our hands on the new one?
Let me just double check that make sure I'm not telling you something that's a lie here. And give me just a second. I'm going to go through a couple of documents real quick. If you guys think of any questions while I'm doing it, just give me just a second.
What's that barbecue sauce?
Thank you.
Yep, no problem. Let's see here. No. I heard barbecue sauce from somebody. It's getting to be that time, close to dinner. And I'm not picking on you. All right. Let's see. Just want to see. So. I don't see the homework in the file, but normally they give you like 10 test questions at the end of each class. And then, well, they do have items for self-assessment. Usually after the class, on the beginning of the next class, they'll go ahead and talk about the homework topics and just kind of double check everybody's answers and make sure that anybody had a got stuck on anything, they cover it. You know what? Rather than keep you guys guessing, I'll find an answer for you to see whether they actually are doing that this time, and I don't know why they wouldn't. And it's maybe as it gets further along, it's last time I did it, it was the chapters based on where the processes start in the PMBOK, and that was chapter 4. Yeah, I think chapter 4 is what it used to be. It started in the PMBOK. And what we've been covering up until now is just basically been the charter, establishing the team, that type of thing, and then we didn't get into the processes yet, which starts in the next chapter, and I think that's where the question started. But let me see if I can find out an answer for you guys, and then hopefully by the next class you'll have the answer if there's anything that you guys should be covering. So, okay. So basically what we covered in this lesson was the importance of assembling the project team and building a shared understanding of the project that you're going to complete. So by empowering the team, we're providing the necessary training and enable them to be accountable to promote a collaborative and cohesive project environment. The learning goals for the lesson were determining that the project team members' requirements, appraise the team's skills, and maintain team knowledge transfer. We collectively define the project ground rules based on context, such as organization rules and team dynamics. And
Hi, we don't see your screen.
No, I'm not sharing a screen right now.
Oh, okay.
I'm just doing a summary. No.
Okay,
one of the things that no, that's okay. One of the things that I learned in ground rules when I was taking the test, and I still use this going forward, that I think is really important, and it seems like something really simple, but when you're creating ground rules for your project and your meetings, you can basically have it be whatever you want. But one of the things that's actually in the PMBOK that sticks out with me is people, and this has nothing to do with you guys, I'm just stating what it is, but people talking one at a time. So when you're doing your daily stand-ups or you're doing your meetings, I've been on calls where, I mean, we've been in the telecommunications business a long time, so when you're talking on a call, you know to wait about 2 seconds before you talk to make sure somebody else isn't going to answer. One of the ground rules that are established for meetings is not talking over one another and keeping the meeting in control. So you don't have people, one person starts talking, the other person tries to correct them and talks over it, and then somebody gets into a little bit of a tiff with them or becomes very emotionally involved in their conversation. So that's just one of the ground rules, and that's just something that stuck out at me because I've been on meetings a lot where people do that, and I finally brought it to one of the manager's attentions and just said, you know, this is something I learned, and I think it's pretty important. So you guys might think about that next time you're on a call and people start talking over one another. You'll remember it when you get to it in the PMBOK. So, all right, so back to we learned to determine a negotiation strategy and negotiate project agreements. Organize around team strengths. As I said, that you don't want everybody having one strength. You want people that have multiple strengths, so you build an awesome team. And you support team task accountability. So you're also going to ensure team members and stakeholders are adequately trained. You want to continually evaluate the effectiveness of virtual team members. And that's one of the things where in the past, virtual team members, sometimes you could get the team that you needed. You might have the whole team together and 2 or 3 people might be in another continent, another state, but you need that person to complete your team, and the only way you can get them is virtual. I know now they're looking a little more towards frowning on having virtual people. They actually want people there in person. And when you watch and realize the size of some of the projects that people are putting together, you can understand why that is. I happened to catch the tail end of raising the Costa Concordia, the cruise ship that went off over in Italy, and they were out there 487 days, I think the salvage crew was, a team of people that were working 24 hours a day, 365 days a week. And when you look at a project of that magnitude, you can realize that doing it virtually would never work. So I can see why sometimes they say yes and sometimes they say no. It's just based on what they need at the time. All right, and the other was to reach a consensus and support the outcome of the parties' agreements. So let me see. I have another question here for you guys. Why do you think it's important to identify and document project stakeholders? And remember, stakeholders are anybody who's going to be affected by your project. So it could be an apartment building. Yep, go ahead.
I was just going to say, to ensure good communication to all levels of all people, including your people who are affected by this change, being people that live there or in the area, or the people who are directly affected by it, the processes and the changes that happen within the organization or the product in itself, to ensure that you have good communication to all levels.
Yep, because the stakeholder isn't just, people might automatically think a stakeholder is like a CEO or the person who's paying for the project, but it could be multiple people in the project that I was going to say something as simple as an apartment building that's getting a new parking lot. So you automatically think, okay, well, the people that live there, but it could be the people that work there. It could be the people passing by. It could be the people that have to work on the signs, people that work on the lawn, the people that are delivering things. Those are all stakeholders because everybody's affected by the project. So basically there's a variety of answers there, but it can include, like you said, people, groups, and organizations that could be impacted or that are impacted by the project, like I just suggested, the project, and to analyze their expectations and the impact on the project. You need to gather their requirements and develop the appropriate management strategies to effectively engage the stakeholders, because just because somebody's a stakeholder in a project doesn't mean that they necessarily agree with your project or that they want your project to succeed. You can have negative stakeholders, and sometimes those are the people that you need to communicate with just as much as the people that are influential stakeholders, because somebody who's a negative person can impact your project just as much as somebody who is a positive person. Does that make sense? Yes, no? Anybody breathing?
Yes.
Okay. So stakeholders are not just the good people giving you money. They could be everybody out there, that's everybody affected by the project. So, okay, so one last question for you guys. I'll test your brain, and that's why we haven't taken a break, because I'm going to go through this and then see if there's any questions. I'll let you guys out a little early. So.
Hi, Tracy.
Yes.
I got a question on that stakeholder. Can a sponsor be also a stakeholder? Because I heard you say that, I think I heard you say stakeholder also has the money, right? But normally it's the sponsor who provides the money for the project. Is that the right thinking?
Yes, but a sponsor could still be a stakeholder.
Okay. That's always the case. The sponsor is a stakeholder, or it can be a stakeholder.
No. The stakeholder could be, I want to think of something bigger. Let's take okay, I'm going to go back to the Costa Concordia, the ship that I was just talking about that went down. So the salvage company that was bringing the ship up is the project, the people who, the team that's managing it. But the stakeholder in that could be, that's a little bit of background there, could be the people who are vendors that are on the shoreline. It could be the town residents that are stakeholders. It could be the Marine Patrol that are stakeholders. Anybody that's affected by the project or that's involved in the project. So it doesn't mean that you just have a monetary gain. It means that anybody that's affected by the project, it could be a stakeholder.
Okay, that's clear. Thank you.
Okay?
Yeah, thanks.
Good question. Okay. All right. Okay, that's pretty much it. And I will tell you that some of this other, the literature that I just covered, that there's not necessarily slides for all this. I think last week, the gentleman that was doing the presentation shared where this deck can come from. And I'm going to check just 1 second to make sure that it's available to you guys. And I think you can go in there and look. Okay, see the test formulas, text prep. Okay. I thought that this might be, I know he shared at one time that I was on the call, but I don't want to share something that I'm not supposed to, so let me get some clarity, and I owe you guys two things. One is the homework, and the other is to see whether these slides are available, the other slides are available to you that have some other questions and stuff on them. In the interim, does anybody have any other questions before we wrap up? Because I'm going to keep the bridge open for a little bit just to make sure, since we are finishing early, that if anybody has a question that I can answer it for them. Wow, you guys are really quiet. Is it because I said anything about talking over people?
I got a quick, probably easy question. Where's the actual, I can't seem to find it again, the document for this class that you just reviewed.
Yep, give me 1 second, let me share. Yep, give me 1 second, let me just share, and I'll show you. Make sure my
I know someone mentioned it before in each of the classes, like I could see what's covered when I go to the, the SharePoint, but I just couldn't find the actual document that you're covering each class.
Yeah, no problem. Let me share so you guys tell me when you can see. It looks like it. So if you go into the invite that you received for the class for tonight, you should have an invite on your calendar for each of the classes. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. When you go into the invite, there's a wiki. And when you click on the wiki, it's going to take you to, slowly, it's going to take you to this page that has all the documents. And then over here on the right-hand side, it says the June PMP classes. And when you click on that, it's kind of like trying to dig down. You have your student documents and then the presentations for the classes that we covered. And tonight, I covered the part 4, the class plan. Actually, you know what? This is what I was looking for. So this is creating this is the actual PowerPoint document. And I believe this was the other document I was looking for. It is not. Okay. That just tells you what chapter of the PMBOK and stuff that we're into. Oh, it must be chapter 5 when I was saying chapter 4. Must be chapter 5 where it starts the processes and stuff. I apologize. So these are the slides that I covered.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, this is them. Any other questions?
Yeah, this is Ken Kiernan. So I'm just wondering, is it here that we would find the list of questions that we would take as a practice test?
You know, that's what I was looking for to see. And that's what I wanted to double check to make sure that they were still doing the homework. And I don't know whether they are or not. Does anybody remember when they mentioned in orientation, did they talk about did someone talk about it?
The only thing I recall is them speaking about those couple questions after each of the chapters that it was.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Are you seeing them?
Not to sound unprepared, but really, we weren't given a whole lot of information other than here are the resources you need to buy.
Yeah, there is a lot of resources and there's a lot of material. I just want to see if but when you said there's the tests, the questions after each class, that's what I was talking about. Normally they go through those and then the next class they do the I'm just looking through here real quickly if I'm making you guys crazy with the slides. Then they talk about the.
We have are, I was going to say the only questions we have are the like 2 that are always at the end of the reflective questions, but there's no like quiz questions.
Well, I said that there was something we would go over with our mentors once we started meeting with our mentors.
Okay.
So we just
maybe that's what they're doing.
Mentors. Yeah, we just got them. Yeah.
That may be what they're doing. Then maybe they're having the mentors do it so they don't take away from class time. That could be. That could be. That makes sense. I think actually, now that you said that, I think I did hear one of the instructors mention that previously. So that's probably correct. So they'll probably start going over questions with you during the class, during your mentor time, your hour a week that you get. Okay. Anything else? I'm going to be here. I'm going to keep it open. I was looking. I did see when I was just thumbing through there about the brain dump and the stuff that you have to learn. Keep learning it a little at a time until you get it. And when you look at that in the beginning, you'll think, oh my gosh, there's no way. And then after a while, I used to time myself, and I could do the brain dump in under 2 minutes on a piece of paper.
Is the brain dump, is that page 25?
Where is that?
It was, I thought I just saw, that's what I was just looking at. And let me go back here.
Yeah.
I thought it was page, I think it's 60,
there is a
61.
Thing called, there's a thing called, I just found it on the PMN website. Under the shared document students only, it says countdown schedule to PMP exam, and they're all listed there. I only thought brain dump was page 25 until you said something about page 49, and I'm like, page 49 looks similar to page 25, so how do I find the rest? So I went on a hunt.
I see. And I'm sure it's changed just a little bit, but let me just, I want to see if I, I think in the PMBOK it was like page 61 or 67. And I think I'm still on the same PMBOK that you guys were on, so.
The PMBOK, it's page 25. If that's the chart, right? Is that what you're talking about?
The chart? Is it page 25?
The knowledge areas, you get the process groups and the knowledge areas?
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay, I just passed it in here and I thought it said, let me just look here. Oh, yep, sure enough. They changed it to, okay, they do also have one on 61. So there is one on 61 as well in the PMBOK.
I'm going to that. I didn't remember seeing that.
I don't think there's a link here.
There's not. I think that might be on. Andy Crow was later in.
I was trying to pull up my PMBOK to see whether I had a copy of it.
Are you saying page 61 of the PMBOK?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is showing
For
qualities
Andy Crow,
and skills for a leader.
Yeah. In Andy Crow, the 49 processes of a project management on page 62.
Okay, and is there like 67 of them, or let me see, 49 of them?
Yep, there's 49.
49. Yeah, okay, that's the one I was talking about. And that's on page 60 what?
62 of Andy Crow.
Okay. So Rita has one and then the PMBOK has one, so. But that's the brain dump that as you start moving, one of the brain dumps as you start moving along that you have to be able to, if you can spiel it out before you start taking the test, then you have that to look at as you're taking the test to kind of use you as a guide. When I was talking about that game where you move the different things around the different process knowledge areas, as you start to learn that brain dump and learn those processes as you're taking the test questions and they talk about, they may say, you know, they've already started forming the teams like the other question we talked about. but they don't have a charter yet. And then they want to talk about, financial resources, and you might have to put them in order or say, the charter comes first, and you can't have, a team until you have a charter, and you can't have resources so you have a team, that type of thing. That's what I was that's what I was going to.
For the brain dump, do you have to do that, like, when you're taking the test, you have to do that right at the beginning? Or, like, how does that work? And then you can refer to it? Because I've seen some of the people that are taking the test from home, and saying that what the AI or whatever says that you took your eyes away from the machine, from your computer too long.
And that's why I said I could do it in less than 2 minutes after a fashion. It takes you a while to practice. You have page after page. When I took the test, I took it in the test center. I didn't take it at home. So we couldn't do it. Now, they were still watching you, don't get me wrong, but you couldn't do it. You couldn't start it until your time started on the clock. And the first time I took the test, you could actually do it prior to your test starting. You had like 10 minutes before you started to answer questions and do some different things. And then they changed it to be part of I think we had 3 hours or 4 hours, I don't remember, to take. And you had to do the brain dump when you first started, because that way then you can refer back to it. You have that sheet of paper that you can write on, and you can go back and look at your notes and look at your processes. So being able to do it before you start the first question was optimal.
Okay. Pushing me more towards taking it at a testing center as opposed to from home.
Yeah, I know that they have the AI watches your eye movement and watches where you're looking, because they don't want you to be looking away to look at somebody else in a room, or to make sure that there's nothing else written down or on a wall or whatever. So I'm not quite sure how that works. And I don't think Luke's on the call, but he took the test recently and passed it. And I don't know I don't remember if he took it at a test center or he took it at home. But
he said he took it at a test center.
He said it at the center, yeah.
Yeah, he didn't want the pressure of losing Wi-Fi.
Well, yeah, that, and actually it does make sense, because you have a tendency, no matter how focused you are, to get distracted and look up at something at home versus being in the cubicle, which I took earplugs with me when I took it, because I can't listen to one of those little crazy things. I don't like people clicking their pen or shuffling their feet, because that kind of gets me off track. So they let you take earplugs that I put in. And once you get focused, you stay focused. You don't even think about looking at the clock until you're close to finish, and then you look up. So I actually, as much as I didn't like taking it at a test center, knowing that I had the option to take it home, I think I still would take it at the test center. That's just food for thought.
Yeah, that probably helps, because here I get distracted by my dog or whatever. Probably better.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what it is, but I wouldn't want to be disqualified for something after working so hard to, on some technicality,
Yeah.
All right. Anything else? Like I said, I'm going to keep this. I can go ahead and I'm going to stop the recording.
I do have a question but it's on the presentation about the sprint planning. To be honest, I've been reading more the Agile practice